South African praise singer and poet Bishop Jessica Mbangeni has died aged 47. Now, the cause of her death is not clear. Born in Nqamakwe in the Eastern Cape, Mbangeni rose to prominence after participating in the Soweto Gospel Choir in 2006. Since then, she has worked with various artists, including Vusi Nova, and also pursued a career in acting. Now, the family has asked for privacy during this difficult time. I'm now joined by poet and author Lebo Mashile to reflect on Mbangeni's life. Lebo, good to have you on the program despite the circumstances. Now, Bishop Mbangeni's work was deeply rooted in the oral traditions of the Eastern Cape. How did her cultural heritage influence her poetry, but also her performances?
She was steeped in isiXhosa, from her attire to the language, the idioms, her mode of storytelling, her references. And I mean, I think what was so extraordinary about Jessica is that in spite of the fact that there have always been women Imbongis, you know, and there's certainly been, you know, women like Nqamakwe, who has taken storytelling in Nguni languages, you know, around the world. But there has never been the kind of Imbongi, female woman Imbongi, who was able to take that art form and catapult it to the national and international levels that Jessica has taken it to. I mean, Jessica performed in Latin America, in Asia, in Canada. She collaborated with all kinds of artists, but she was still deeply grounded in where she came from. You know, Jessica took poetry to levels that it's never been taken to. You know, she was a SACMA award-winning artist. She performed at the Summers. She performed on the greatest stages that we have in this country. So my heart is really sore because obviously, I mean, I've shared many milestones with Jessica, you know, from performing at the inauguration in 2004, you know, when she was still a part of Soweto Gospel Choir, to the many platforms we've shared as poets, you know, Poetry Africa, to, you know, even you know, the kind of cultural resistance work that we both shared. You know, Jessica had a keen sense of justice. Like when Abasali were protesting at the National Arts Council and were living, artists were living at the National Arts Council building in Johannesburg, Jessica was one of the most ardent supporters. I was there with her. So, you know, she cared. We buried people together. We mourned the loss of people like Bo, Bradon Matera, and our elders in poetry, She performed at the funeral of Winnie Mandela. I never imagined a future without Jessica, ever.
Lebo, Jessica was also known for her unique blend of spiritual and these cultural themes that we keep speaking about. Can you discuss how her approach to these themes has impacted, call it the contemporary poetry landscape in this country?
Sure. I think Jessica brought a sense of indigeneity to contemporary poetry. I remember at Poetry Africa one year, you know, Poetry Africa always has a huge poetry slam as part of the festival. And I mean, now the national poetry slam takes place at Poetry Africa. But before then, Jessica battled Ewok, who is a writer, rapper, actor from KZN, beloved, who writes in English. You know, I mean, there's Jessica going toe-to-toe with a battle rapper who writes in English, a white guy in isiXhosa. You know, she was just like, she was fearless. She took her art form into spaces that you would never, ever imagine. And I think that was liberating for us as a people. It showed poets, it showed African poets, it showed women poets, it showed Black kids that you can do whatever the hell you want with your language. You can take it anywhere. There's nowhere where your indigenous language cannot live as literature. She was fearless.
Yeah. I want to touch on that point, the fact that she was fearless. Let's reflect on Jessica the activist, which is also something you just touched about. As someone who has also made this significant contribution to the arts, how do you think Mbangeni's work will influence future generations of poets and performers?
Oh, gosh. I mean, I think about her reverence for the stage. I mean, from her attires, Jessica. I think when we all imagine Jessica, we imagine her with those incredible attires, the beadwork, the traditional fabrics, the head wraps. You know, I mean, she wore a lion to the summers. Jessica was just bold. She sold traditional attires as well. You know, Jessica was very entrepreneurial. She was very clear about the fact that you are not going to mess around with her money. I mean, I know a number of people who were taken to newspapers by Jessica for not paying her when she wanted to be paid. She was that fearless. But she was also the type of artist who was not going to sit down and wait for gigs. You know, she knew that she had a currency as an artist, as a creative, that whatever it was that she was about was something that she could figure out and monetize. And she monetized all her skills, her musical abilities. Then after she established herself as a poet, as an Imbongi, as the premier female Imbongi in South Africa, then she went back to her musical roots and produced albums and collaborated with contemporary artists. You know, I've seen Jessica at political platforms. I've seen her at cultural platforms. I've seen her at protests. So I think, you know, her contribution to poetry is vast, and I think the lasting impact of her legacy will be that you can curate yourself as an artist however you want to be, and that all of the skills that you have can come to the party to allow you not just to make money, but also to make an impact.
Yeah.
You know, for a young woman from the Eastern Cape, a singer, to come from the Eastern Cape and end up in Joburg, and, you know, 25 years later to be remembered as, like, you know, the foremost woman in Imbongi that we've ever had is extraordinary. And if she could do it, it means any woman, any young girl who's sitting at home right now watching can also do it.
I want us to crystallize that point, Lebo. What do you believe were the core elements that made Mbangeni's poetry resonate so deeply with her audience?
People loved the fact that Jessica wrote in isiXhosa. When Jessica stood on stage, she ignited this sense of pride and a fire in people. She enjoyed getting audiences to respond. She enjoyed being a maverick. If you didn't put Jessica in your program, Jessica didn't care. She would hijack that program. She got on that stage. She would start shouting from the audience. Her performance would start in the audience, and she would perform all the way until she got to the podium. You were going to deal with Jessica, you know? I think people appreciated the fact that when she performed, she brought a sense of groundedness and rootedness, but also grandeur, you know? I mean, everything about Jessica was about scale, you know, from the outfits to the voice. Her presence was so over the top and grand, you know? I appreciated that about her, that she wasn't afraid to take up space. She wasn't afraid of theatrics. She wasn't scared of what people think. Even on social media, Jessica would post herself in a costume diving into the water in Argentina in front of white people. She didn't care. She was like, you know, and people would write their nasty things. She did not care. Jessica lived life 1000% on her terms.
Yeah, yeah. But in what ways did her role as a spiritual leader intersect with this work as a poet? And how did this dual role shape her artistic expression, if you will?
You know, to be honest, I don't want to declare myself an authority on her spiritual life.
Sure.
I didn't know much about that aspect of her, as much as I knew that she was very public, you know, about it, but it wasn't the level at which we connected. I connected with her as an artist, and in terms of the spirituality of her work, you know, her work invoked how do I even say it? Her work invoked moya, man. You know, she spoke to the spirit. She spoke to the soul. She spoke to the soul of Black people. She spoke to the soul of the earth that she came from. She spoke to the soul of her language, the wisdom of her language. She inspired people by making us believe that as we are regal, we are powerful. There is enough knowledge and information and wisdom and beauty in what we already have. We don't have to be anybody else to be worthy of affirmation and praise, you know? It meant a tremendous amount to me to be able to share now, especially, you know, I mean, as I say, it's like I never imagined a future without Jessica, you know, because like me and her on a platform together was like 6 and 9, you know. I mean, as much as I write most of my stuff in English and what, but you know, we were like two sides of the same coin, I think. You know, between us, we kind of showed the scope of what is possible, you know, me amongst many others, because there are many incredible poets writing in all kinds of languages. But I just speak about, you know, the two of us because I've had the opportunity to spend time with her, also to be with her on platforms. And I think we showed the length and breadth of what is possible with this art form for Black women in particular, you know? So when Jessica got on stage, people felt ignited and affirmed. And I'm going to miss that terribly. I'm still like, what do you mean? I mean, Jessica was larger than life. How can she not be alive? It doesn't make sense.
What a special tribute. Lebo Mashile, thank you so much for joining us today and really sharing your insights into the remarkable life and work also of Bishop Jessica Mbangeni, where news of her death broke earlier on today.